or good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. You may be watching the replay or you may be live. I'm just going to wait for a few more people just to join us. You're welcome to navigate around this webinar portal if you like. So you will see that we have got a chat feature and you're welcome to pop anything into the chat. And there's also a questions feature. So you can ask any questions if you like. So if you do have a question, I'll try and monitor the questions as I go through. If you can. Good morning, Craig. Thank you for being the first one to break the ice on the chat. Lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining me. We'll get started in just a moment. Good morning, everyone. Perhaps what you can do, it's always lovely, I think, in webinars if people write where they are joining us from. So if you'd like to pop in the chat where you're situated, I think that's always fun to see. Awesome. Oh, right around Australia. Love it. Fantastic. So lovely to see everyone joining in. Well, let's get started. If for any reason you have any technical issues, please just pop something in the chat for me. So if you can't see anything or you can't hear anything, please let me know. But we're going to be here for about 2 hours. So I know that sounds like a long time, right? But there's a lot to cover. And as always with these webinars, there will be a lot of different things that I'm going to offer at the end for free that you can engage in or you can utilize. So it's worth sticking around if you can. Make sure you've got a glass of water. Make sure you've got the door closed. You're not going to be interrupted. Grab a pen and paper. You'll definitely want to be taking down some notes through this. And please feel free to ask questions along the way. Hi, Michelle. Lovely to see you. Great to see you on the webinar as well. Look, there's a few familiar names that I can see in the chat there. So let's kick it off. I'm going to get it started. Get my slides up and running. So just to kick us off, I want to do a little bit of an introduction for who the Hinwood Institute is, who we are, who I am, what this is all about, because some people know me, some people don't. So I want to start by telling you a little bit of a story. This is Dr. John and Judy Hinwood. Now, they founded the Stress Management Institute back in 2013. They founded the Stress Management Institute and the Stress to Strength system, which is a model of coaching and stress management support. Now, this is based on their 17 years of intensive experience as primary healthcare practitioners and as practicing chiropractors. They moved into a management role and for 20 years as consultants, coaches, and mentors. And they were doing that to primary and allied healthcare practitioners. And they were very successful in that field of work. And they built really big businesses, sold their businesses, and their lasting legacy of work was the Stress Management Institute. Now, in October 2020, Dr. John Hinwood died of, and I'm going to struggle to say this, mesothelioma. That's a mouthful. That's really hard to get out of my mouth. His passing absolutely rocked the world. And as word spread that John was living his last days, both he and Judy were absolutely flooded with messages from around the world. John and Judy had built a legacy that crossed the globe. This is before the internet, before people were traveling. They wrote books. They spoke at international stages. So when John passed, it really did rock the globe. There were just messages coming from everywhere. And as word spread that with John passing, he was just so touched to have so many messages coming in. People who had been really impacted by his work, an incredible scope of work, wanted to express their heartfelt appreciation for all he had done for them. And for some people, both John and Judy had changed their lives. He had educated and mentored and befriended tens of thousands of people in his lifetime. you're probably going, well, why am I telling you this story? Now, Michael, there's this man by the name of Michael. This is Michael here. Michael and I, that's me, we were long-term, Michael in particular was a long-term friend of Dr. John and Judy. We'd also been associates. We'd also studied through the Stress Management Institute. So John and Judy, I was a student of the Stress Management Institute and a graduate from their program. I also worked for them in their business, and John and Judy also became my mentors. In fact, Judy is still my mentor. And we decided, Michael and I decided to honour the legacy of work, and we amalgamated our intellectual property to form the Hinwood Institute. So that is where the business got its name from, is to honour the legacy of Dr. John and Judy Hinwood. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today comes from their work. I'm going to be referencing them quite a bit throughout this webinar, little nuggets of gold that they have shared, that they have learned through their probably 20, 30 years of work. Now, here's another little interesting fact. Michael and I have been in business together officially on the books since, I think, March 2021. We've never physically met. So one day we'd actually like to meet in person, which is, that's a bit out there, right? Okay, so what we're going to cover today, as I mentioned, there's quite a lot to cover. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of sciencey stuff with you. We're going to look at what are stress symptoms. Sometimes people don't even realize what is symptomatic from stress, what triggers our stress, completely different for everyone, and what that stress experience is like. There is so much research out there, and gosh, I wish I could pack a whole lot more into this webinar for you, but I'm going to stick to the fundamentals, the foundational research that exists. Then what I'm going to share with you is how to hack your brain to harness stress. This is about going from smashed to absolutely smashing it. This is how to make stress work for you and use it. And I'm going to share with you how to control your body's response to stress so you can absolutely own it. What are the secrets to emotional resilience? What this is based on research and industry best practice. The tools, I'm going to give you some tools, one of our most popular tools that you can immediately apply. Now, remember, when we're stressed, our brain doesn't work very well. So this is about things that you can remember in the moment. And that's what we love to do, is to be able to give people things that they can remember in those situations that are going to really make a difference for them. And we're going to finish up with the principles, summarizing some of the key principles of success. Now, someone's just said in the chat that they can't see the slides. Can everybody, can you let me know if you can see the slides, or if anybody can't see the slides? Can everyone see the slides? Just pop a yes in the chat if you can. They're very small. The font is very small. You can't see. No, the slides are small. Okay. This is an interesting dilemma for me because this is a new program for me. I wonder if I can make it bigger. How's that? Is that is that good? Ah, great. Okay. It means you can't see me, but you can see the slides. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for raising that in the chat. This is a new program that I'm using, as I mentioned. So apologize if you couldn't see it. So I really appreciate you popping that in the chat. I'm just going to drop my preview window down. If it affects the size of the slides for any reason, please let me know. It just enables me to see my notes. I just adjusted my preview window. Did that change anything for anyone? That okay? If it changed anything, just pop a little note in the, it shouldn't do. It's all good. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Let me tell you, this is a great example of operating under stress, right? When you've got these things that happen, technology can be quite stressful for some people. Okay, so I want to share with you what, in terms of that body of work, there's all of us coming together to be able to bring together a body of work and a body of learning. What we've found through our work is there's no one pillar that stands alone. So we're obviously focusing a lot today on stress and on resilience. But let me tell you, there are these other things that impact on stress and resilience. So for example, time, I'm known as the time tamer. Time management and stress management are my area of expertise. The reason I started studying stress management is because I recognized that people who were not able to manage their time were incredibly stressed. And if they were stressed, they couldn't manage their time. They went hand in hand together. And typically with the people that I'm coaching, I inevitably coach them in other areas. I'm equipping them with skills to be able to communicate better, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on, to assert themselves, to manage difficult conversations that can be stressful, how to manage your well-being. Once again, we're going to talk a lot about that. This is something that Michael is really passionate about and has built a lot of industry around this space. And leadership. Now, leadership, some people will say, well, I'm not in a leadership position, but I'll actually argue that we all end up in positions of leadership at some point. If you're a parent, congratulations, you are practicing leadership. If you are on a board or a committee within your community, there's always someone looking to you because you've walked the path before them. So there will always be times where in your capacity of leadership. So all of these things impact upon each other. And if one is really we're struggling with it, then it's going to impact on the others. Now, this is what we typically see when people come to us. These are the things that people typically share with us in terms of what they're experiencing when those things are out of balance. These are the top three that most people will say. They're either overwhelmed, overworked, or just over it. I'm just over this. I'm over this emotional roller coaster, the ups and downs. And for some people, that means that they feel like an imposter. They feel like they're not being the person they set out to be. They are not doing the work they wanted to do, or they're letting down the people at home. And a common thing we hear is that work gets the best of me and home gets what's left over. They get what's left. And that can lead us to feeling negligent. Like we are not being the person we know we can be, the person we promise to be to those around us. And we feel off course, right? I think everybody can feel like that at some point. We can all feel like that. So if we can get some tools and strategies to help us in these challenging situations, then we can shift over into a position of power. So we should be feeling valued by those around us, by the people we work with. We want to be solution focused, have solutions to navigate through those tricky waters and to be able to make decisions in the moment. This gives us absolute rocket fuel motivation. We feel inspired to go to work. We feel inspired to do the things in our lives that are important and the goals that we want to achieve. We should be feeling inspired and motivated in life. And that means that we're able to make strategic choices, whether that's at work or in our personal life. That means choices that are taking in the direction we want to be going to achieve the things in life we want to achieve, whether it be the goals at work or the goals in our personal life. And we become trailblazers. That means people look to us for advice, direction, and to answer some of those challenging questions. And that just makes us feel more confident and certain about what we're doing. So that's where we want to take you. We want to shift you from one side of the page to the other, basically, to be able to feel empowered, inspired, and motivated in your work and in your life. Well, here's a little bit of doom and gloom. I'm going to give you the facts and the realities. Now, this is not to put a downer on you, but to make you realize you are not alone. The experiences that you have are quite common. And these are the things that we know. There is so much research out there now, as I said. But this one, I think, is, even though it's a bit old, this was one that was very popular with John and Judy to really accentuate the normal life of Australians. Now, 90% of adult Australians feel stress in at least one important area of their lives. When we talk about areas of life. That is things like work, relationships, health, finances, that wheel of life that people often talk about. 90%, most of Australians feel some kind of stress in one of those areas. We can all relate to that, right? There's always something going on. 40%, so almost half, feel really stressed about one part of their life. So the only thing I will say is remember that this was in 2015 before COVID. Be really interesting. We haven't had quite the same research. They're similar, but not quite the same research to show us where Australians are feeling in relation to the stress in everyday life. Now, here's some of the things that we are seeing. So some of this research comes from Beyond Blue, Productivity Commission inquiry, surveys that have been done. And this is some of the standout information that I wanted to share with you. What we're seeing, John and Judy predicted a long time ago that stress, they could see it in the work that they were doing, how much stress impacted on businesses. We know about mental health days, right? Chucking a sickie. Mental ill health costs Australian businesses, cost Australia 39 billion in lost productivity and lower economic participation. That's the cost to all of Australia in terms of their capacity to function well. Now, stress burnout is reported for 1 in 3 employees who take sick days. If you think of the cost of sick days and the impact that has on productivity, kind of makes sense, right? Healthy employees are 3 times more productive than unhealthy employees. There's no surprises there, but 3 times, that's quite significant. Stress is a cause of cancer, health disease, and stroke. We know that already. We know the correlation between that. But this is a really interesting one. Stress-related absenteeism equates to 9.3 days per year per employee. Don't you think that's huge? I think that's massive. That's the average stress-related absenteeism, people not being at work. And in 2019, this one I think is really, really significant because this is where we're starting to see a recognition of the relationship between stress and work, stress and the cost to business and economy. In 2019, the World Health Organization classified burnout as an occupational phenomenon resulting from chronic workplace stress. Predominantly, the stress that people experience or the burnout is associated with the work that they do. Now, when I started studying with John and Judy with the Stress Management Institute, as I said, they were predicting that the correlation between stress and work was going to shift. Like people were going to start to notice this and want to make changes within organizations. Big companies will want to save money. This is a leaky tap for them. And the first big research that came out around the time that John and Judy started the Stress Management Institute was between Medibank Private and Deloitte. At the time, it was the only research that we could find in Australia around stress. Since COVID, so much research is out there now within Australia, and more research is being conducted. And I don't know that John and Judy would have ever predicted this, but now in Australia, we have legislation that is actually supporting healthy workplaces. We now have legislation around the psychological safety within the workplace. So now with workplace health and safety legislation, you have to mitigate the risk of mental injury within the workplace. So not just physical injury, but mental injury. That's huge, right? And as you're probably all aware, there's federal legislation now around the right to switch off. Huge. These are huge. And I don't know that John and Judy would ever have predicted to see legislation change around the importance of stress management within the workplace. They were way ahead of their time, John and Judy. Okay, so this is where we're going to start to do some practical things now. I'm going to show you a slide that is to show you the symptoms of stress. So by the time we are well and truly swimming in stress and we're starting to experience it, we're going to see some telltale signs. I'm going to show you a whole heap of examples of the symptoms of stress, and I want you to write down any that resonate with you. So they're going to slowly appear on the screen. And I want you to write down any that resonate with you. Remembering that people experience stress differently. This is critical. When we're doing stress management coaching, this is critical to be able to identify these flags, because a lot of people ignore them. And the benchmark of normal shifts. So if you're constantly having a stomach churning, that might be normal. That's everyday life. It shouldn't be, right? You just accept that as the norm. I know for me that I am stressed. When I'm stressed, I get tensions in my chest muscles, around my sternum. I get little aches in there. Now, when I first experienced that, I thought I was having a heart attack. I get tight muscles in my neck and my shoulders. Sometimes I don't chew at my fingernails, but I'll bite the nail. Like I'm really, really anxious or nervous. And I also start dreaming that I'm working. They're the flags for me when I know that I'm stressed. If you feel comfortable, you feel open to it, I'd love you to type in the chat anything that you recognize as your flag for you when you're stressed. Some people have gut issues. They can get an upset tummy. And the interesting thing about stress is some people put on weight because they crave comfort foods, chocolate, alcohol, all of those things. Where people like me, when I'm stressed, my digestion just switches off. When I broke my wrist recently, it was very stressful, very painful, navigating the recovery, and totally lost my appetite. Rama says headaches sometimes. That's really, really common. I had a client I was working with who got chronic migraine. So we're actually, the biggest shift for her was the reduction of stress days, because migraines would just smash her. Trouble sleeping as well. Yeah, really these are really common symptoms. Sylvia says neck pain. Yep, I hear you. Waking up tired's a really interesting one as well, because you can actually, I'm going to be talking about a hormone called cortisol, which is a hormone we produce when we are stressed. And if we've got too much of it in our system when we go to sleep, we can actually wake up feeling tired, like we haven't actually had a rest. Rapid breathing. This is an interesting one. I'll see if I've got a pen around me. You know, this tapping. Oh, you probably can't see me anymore. Tapping on your desk with a pen. I'll do it near the microphone. You've seen people wiggling their leg. Oh my God, Craig said all of the above. Fiona, if you want copies of the slides, you are more than welcome to email me and I'll send them to you. I will be emailing out a recording afterwards as well. Great question. Yes, and I can appreciate why you would want a copy. There's going to be a lot of information in these slides, so I can appreciate why you want copies of them. Okay, so hopefully you've got some of those written down. Really important. I want you to start to recognize what are your alarm bells. Really, really important. As I said, when I'm coaching people, this is the first kind of thing that we start to work on. When are the alarms going off that you've reached capacity? I'm going to be showing you how to be more resilient so you can sail through some of those things, and hopefully those alarm bells won't go off. Okay, so now I'm going to move into another area of research. This comes from Dr. Carl Albrecht, who is a management consultant and who's based in California. This is actually back from 1979. And he was a pioneer in the development of stress reduction training, particularly for business people. And he defines 4 common types of stress. And this is predominantly about what will trigger your stress, okay? So it's a little bit different. And if you're interested in this, he actually published a book called Stress and the Manager. But this, what he actually identified, is not just for work, it's across our lives as well. So I'm going to go through the types of things that will create that stress for you or trigger that stress, and see if you can identify with some of these. So anticipatory stress is one that you'll be familiar with. This is where you're concerned about the future. You're worrying about something that can happen, worrying about a job interview, worrying about having a performance evaluation at work, worrying about speaking on stage, worrying about the webinar you're going to do tomorrow. It can be focused on a specific event at work, at home, a sporting event, or a social encounter. It can also sometimes be a bit vague and undefined, just an overall sense of dread about the future or worrying that something is going to go wrong. Now, what I find really interesting about this is psychologists will often say that depression is founded on thoughts of the past and anxiety is founded on thoughts of the future, which is interesting when you understand that. Craig has asked, what is the difference between worry and thinking about? What psychologists would probably say, Craig, is remunerating. So when people, we won't talk too much about vicarious trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder when I don't go into those areas too much when I'm talking about stress. But what is typical for vicarious trauma or PTSD is ruminating. So overthinking about things. If you are daydreaming or exploring, that we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on as an experience of stress. That's okay. It's when you overthink things and those thoughts interfere with your operation and the way that you approach things. So I hope that helps answer that question, Craig. It's when something gets overdone, and it's like anything. We can overeat, we can overthink, we can over-exercise. I mean, who would want to do that? But so, Craig, this is why when psychologists talk about the difference between depression, which is based in the past, and anxiety, which is based in the future, the sweet spot in the middle, which people very rarely sit in, is when we're in a practice of mindfulness. That's why those mindfulness activities are so powerful for stress management. These are great questions. Awesome questions, everyone. The next one, which is obviously where I've started out in my business, is the time stress. This is a really big one. And interestingly, this is why I studied stress management as well as the practice of time management. They just go hand in hand, right? When we can't manage our time, it can really exacerbate our stress. And it's the most common type of stress that people experience today. With the introduction of technical tools that are supposed to help us, they actually make us more stressed because our time is getting stressed and the expectation of what we can achieve within certain times is being increased. When I first entered the workforce, fax machines were modern technology. That's how ancient I am. Oh my God. And we used to talk about the professional, most appropriate response time to business correspondence, whether it be through a fax or written correspondence. Like 2 weeks was what you'd normally expect. George has said, should I work till late hours to be ahead of work after my staff have left the office, or should I clock after a certain time as a business? Just going to say where, as a business owner. So, George, that's a really interesting question, because part of what I do with coaching people is about setting some boundaries, not just with your colleagues, your clients, but also with yourself. And the idea is that you're achieving what you can within reasonable work hours and setting some solid boundaries. So it's about being realistic in terms of when other people will need you or impose upon you within business hours, and when are the productive times and the energy management times where you can really, really focus. So, George, at the end of this webinar, I will be providing everybody with the opportunity to have a one-on-one with me for free and no sales. I would totally encourage you to book that in, and because then I can talk to you more about some solutions specific to you to be able to customize that environment to create boundaries for yourself and to mitigate the stress that those lapse boundaries can create. Fantastic question as well. Just see if we've got any others there. Okay, go back to the chat. All right, George, awesome. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to mention is encounter stress. This is a really interesting one as well. And this totally revolves around people. You experience counter stress when you're worrying about interacting with certain people or a group of people, worrying about having that conversation with a board member or the boss or a difficult client or a difficult employee. You may not like them, or you might think that they're unpredictable. You don't know how they're going to react or what they're going to say. Encounter stress can also occur if you're in a role that involves a lot of personal interactions with customers or clients, and especially if those people are in a state of distress. We're starting to move across into that vicarious trauma space, but if you're constantly having to be the go-to person when customers are in a state of distress, that's hard. That's encounter stress. That is really draining. And this type of stress is when you feel overwhelmed or drained by interacting with too many people. So this is why in this picture, I've got this working mother. Look at the encounter stress she must be experiencing. She's trying to encounter all these people in the workplace. She's probably worried about what they think about her. And then she's got this little person that's demanding her time and attention. And working mums really, really struggle with encounter stress because basically everyone wants a piece of them. Everyone. And by the time they get home and into the bed and their hubby wants to have a little cuddle and kiss, and they're like, don't touch me. Just don't touch me, because they've just exhausted all of that energy to be able to support this last person. That's what I mean about work getting the best of you and home gets what's left over. And then the next one that we have is situational stress. So that is where the actual situation is creating a stressor for you. So it might be going into a workplace mediation at work. It can be starting a new job or something challenging that's happening at work. It can be where there's conflicts or tensions. So just having to go into work knowing that there's difficult things happening or something big's going to happen, a big event, and is everything going to go okay? A wedding is a classic example of situational stress. These kind of things the situation and the environment is causing that stress for you. So I just want to reiterate, these aren't the causes of our stress. These are the symptoms of stress. So this is what it looks like when the flags that are going off. But these are what we've just talked about, is the types of things that will trigger your stress. So time, anticipating something, the situation that you are in or going to be in, or having too much contact with people. Lastly, I want to go across the classifications of stress. So this is now what it's like when you actually are experiencing those stress, the stress. What are the different types of stress that you are experiencing? So the previous information is kind of what will trigger that stress for you, but when you're actually in the moment and experiencing that stress, what are the different types or classifications of that? Now, this was developed by Hans Selye, who was an endocrinologist who moved from Hungary to Canada in the 30s. And he started to develop the idea that you need to understand how you can use stress to benefit your life. And his work comes from 1973. So 70s was obviously a big time around stress, right? And he published a book called Stress Without Distress. And so when we start to understand stress a lot more, we can use it to empower us rather than disempower us. And I always talk about stress gets such a bad rap, right? It's often a dirty word, but it's about knowing when to turn it on to make it work for you, but turn it off when you don't need it. And some understanding these types of stress will help. So the first one I'm going to talk about is eustress, which is typically associated with physical exercise. You're doing something that is good for you and helps you. And it's you as in euphoria. When I first started studying stress, I'd never heard of this before. So this is normally the kind of stress when we experience when we're doing physical activity, exerting ourselves. All of these stresses, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So you know that we can overdo it with physical exercise, for example. We can push ourselves too fast, too long, etc. Not me, but apparently there's people out there that do it. Now, John used to often talk about finding ways to do things when we in between work and home, some physical activity that can uplift us and help release good positive hormones, which I'll talk about a little later on. I want to play a video for you, but I don't know if the sound will come through. It's just a fun little video. If you can't hear, it's only one that I've got in this presentation. If you can't hear it, can you just pop in the chat and let me know, and I'll skip past it, but I'll play the little video for you. So can you hear that? Can someone just type a yes if you can hear sound? No. Bummer. Well, I'll have to send that to you I don't know how to adjust it within my presentation. I'm so sorry, but it's probably a good thing in the interest of time if I skip past it. It was just a fun little video. Okay, we'll keep rolling on. Sorry to disappoint you. Now you'll feel like you're missing out on something. You're not. It was just a fun little video. This is a really interesting one. This is called under stress. Now, this is when you are overwhelmed with boredom, or you feel invisible at work, or you're being underutilized within the workplace. And that, believe it or not, can be quite destructive. And this really hit home for me when I thought about a job that I had with an organization where there'd been a change of management. The new manager didn't like me for whatever reason, didn't relate to me, didn't connect to me, didn't really understand what my position was within the organization. And I realize now that I was bullied because I was excluded and intentionally left out. But I would go to work each day and be so unstimulated. I struggled to find work to do. I wasn't being included in meetings or discussions. Work wasn't being given to me. I really struggled to find work to do each day. It was not like I was under the pump, right? But I was so stressed going to work every day for that reason. And that's a classic example of under stress. We know that when people are in solitary confinement, it's really detrimental to their mental well-being, that isolation and lack of stimulation. So surprisingly, it is a form of stress, or no surprises. And it can be bioaccumulative as well. So where it can be good, though, is where you have the opportunity to be able to allow your mind to wander, to be able to daydream around ideas and different things. So this information's a bit old now, but here's an interesting statistic. The average life expectancy of North American executives on retirement, so these are executives that retire, their average life expectancy after retirement is 18 months. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what John used to quote. Senior executives of the Australian Tax Office in Brisbane, their life expectancy on retirement was 9 months. So that just shows you that not having stimulation can be detrimental to your health. The same is said too for people that go into nursing homes as well, is when they're not, everything's being done for them, they're not actively involved in things, then they've got no stimulation, It can be really, really stressful. And lastly, this one will be one that you're familiar with as well. Now, this is one that George was kind of talking about, right? This is overstress. So this is where you are basically burning the midnight oil to get something done. You are pushing yourself to achieve something and to get results. It is okay in small bursts. It's okay sometimes to do this, but all the time is not healthy. There are some people that like to function like this, who feel like they perform well, and they're the people that used to cram their assignments the night before they were due. So you might relate to that. Craig has also said under stress can also occur if you outgrow your position or your organization. Totally true. So you feel stagnated. That's a great example, Craig. Thank you for sharing that one. Yeah, that's a really, really good example. So I think overstress, I don't need to talk too much about that one. You know that it can be good in short bursts, but doing it too much is not good for you. And look, there are people that like to brag about how they only need 6 hours sleep a night. It is detrimental to your health. We actually need really, really good sleep to be able to reprogram our brain. And there's so much research now that shows that sleep deprivation can age you incredibly. For men, their testosterone levels drop dramatically. It also means that the proteins in your brain that normally get released when you go into deep sleep and REM sleep and have long extended sleep, those don't get broken down in your brain, and those proteins are attributed to Alzheimer's. So you have a greater risk of Alzheimer's if you don't get good sleep. So don't think that you're a hero by burning that midnight oil. The last one, everyone knows about this. This is where distress, and this is where the autonomic nervous system comes into play. I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but this is when we go into that flight or fight response. And we now know there's fight or flight, or sit tight, which is the freeze response. So we know more about that in terms of how our body responds to keep us alive. Otis saying, I think of the 1980s leaders who bragged about getting by with minimal sleep. Thatcher and Reagan both later in life had mental degradation. I totally get you. Totally, Oda. Yeah, there's a correlation. My uncle was a workaholic as well and died of Alzheimer's. So there's a lot more research that's coming out about it. And people just think sleep is one of those easy things that they can sacrifice in terms of productivity, and it's not. So in terms of distress, what I want to point out to you, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on, is when we have a threat to our well-being, so let's say it's a crocodile that is going to eat us, our body goes into survival mode and it pumps hormones into our system to enable us to survive. So cortisol is the big hormone that we'll talk about. And what cortisol will do is it'll trigger the response of adrenaline and a few other hormones. But basically what's happening is it's shutting off the things you don't need and turning on the things you do need. So you need energy, which is the adrenaline. You need to fuel the energy, which is all of the glucose that's produced in your body, those kind of things. You need oxygen to be pumping through your body, through your muscles, and priming your muscles and getting oxygen to your brain so your body can be a machine to fight that crocodile or run from that crocodile. The things that you don't need when you are in those situations, you don't need to sit down and eat a sandwich, so your digestive system's going to shut down. You don't need to reproduce, so that's going to turn off. You do not need to sleep, so any of those hormones that support that will be shut off, right? So the reality is, though, that what causes us distress or a threat to our well-being, this is the key thing here, right? Whatever it causes distress for us or a threat to our well-being will trigger that hormonal response. Not many of us have crocodiles chasing us. I know there's a few Darwin people in this webinar. I would like to think you don't have crocodiles chasing you. The things that cause us distress is we can't find a car park and we're running late for a meeting. The internet's dropped out and we're just about to go on an important Zoom call. Can't find our wallet or our purse. Lost the car keys. Lost the mobile phone, right? We're not going to die, but there's a part of our brain, which I'll talk about a bit later, that doesn't know the difference between a real threat or a perceived threat. It just knows there's a threat to your well-being and will trigger the hormones that you need to mitigate that risk and to stay alive. So if we wrap it up for you in terms of the classifications of stress, we have eustress, overstress, understress, and distress. So what we've got in terms of looking at that science of stress, we've got all of the symptoms with what triggers the stress, and this is the experience in here, right? So there's a lot to think about there, and I hope you can kind of wrap your head around it. Now what I want to share with you is what the science is telling us about how we can use our brain to hack that, to override that response and to harness the stress and utilize it for us. And the key here is Tony Robbins talks about perception or procedure. You can choose to change the way you think about something, or you can change the way that you process it. And it's psychologists talk about cognitive brain theory. It's about rewiring your brain to think about the experience differently and to change your approach to it. And I'm going to give you some practical examples of that. And I've got another video, and I really do want you to watch this one. So I'm going to see if I can share this video. So may not let me see if there's a setting that I can do here to allow for the audio. To share audio, share a tab or screen instead. Well, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, this is a really weird program. So entire screen. Okay. I'm going to try. Here we go. Found it. System audio. Let's give this a shot. I think I found the button. Thank you, Ramya, for your support there. All right. I reckon I've got it. Make this nice and big for you. Let's see if this works. I'm going to play this video, and what I want you to do for me once again is just in the chat, let me know if you can hear the audio. It just helps with the atmosphere, this one. It's a race, and can you hear it? Can you type yes or no in the chat for me?
The 600-meter underway. Heather Dornan in Minnesota finished second this event a year ago. She was in lane 4.
And Dornan is probably going to be your favorite. She actually won the NCAA championships in 2006 in the 800, but she only won one Big Ten championships in the 2 years.
3 laps in this event, 600 meters, 3 times around the 200-meter track here at the field house.
What a bold move by Fawn. She's looking very confident, and the Penn State runner is just running amazing today. She did win her heat in the 400, but ended up taking 4th overall.
That's Fawn Dorr moving into the lead, a sophomore from Penn State. Dornan running second.
Dornan last year scored 23 points for the Golden Gophers in their Big Ten championship, so they're really relying on getting a lot of points from her this weekend, and she's just coming by Fawn Dorr now in the home stretch, heading into the bell lap.
Dornan falling down, gets up quickly, but that's going to cost her. Lucky she wasn't injured.
Her teammate just went to the front, though, so they may be able to recover from that. And Dornan is flying down the
She
backstretch.
is catching up.
She is going to catch Fondor, and she may catch the leader.
Wow.
Well, she's got fun.
This is a gutsy effort by Donovan. Can she pull
Unbelievable.
it off? She's moving to third. Donovan coming down the stretch from the outside. Donovan coming on strong. Donovan all the way. Donovan. She did it. Wow, unbelievable.
That is amazing. To fall in a 600, I mean, this is basically a sprint. I mean, this is an extended 400, basically. To fall with 200 meters to go and you get up and win, that is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
That's one of the most exciting things I've seen. Here's the fall.
Oh, she trips on Fawn's shoe.
It looked like Fawn just clipped her heel, and she went down just before the bell lap.
Fondor had to high hurdler to avoid a collision.
And she is powering down this home stretch, just doing everything she can to win this heat.
Look how close that was. Wow. How's that? So that was actually back in 2008, and it was a Big Ten indoor event in Minneapolis. And back then, there had not been, we see a lot of those kind of examples now, right? Where people overcome those kind of adversities to still win the race. And we probably saw some of that kind of behavior in the Olympics. And but Heather Donadan became really famous for that event. And I think it inspired a lot of athletes afterwards to be able to overcome and to know that people have done it before them. I'm just going to read some of the information that came through an interview with her, because she became renowned for that event. She actually said she was making a move to pass another competitor going into the last lap of the race. And she said she probably didn't account for enough space for her long stride. And she felt her heel get clipped once. And then on the second time, she knew she was going down. Oh my God, I can totally relate to this story, having done the same thing when I broke my wrist. Fortunately, she didn't break her wrist. When asked what was going through her mind as she fell, she said, maybe I just closed my eyes tight throughout the process of skidding to a halt on my stomach, or maybe the positive vision of what I was hoping to accomplish in that race was stronger than the adversity I faced, because I had no idea I fell like that. She actually said that the first thing she remembered seeing after the sensation of falling was her hands on the track and pushing off from that. And she figured she had just bent down at the waist to touch the track and kept running. All she remembered is thinking, well, that's not good, having your hands on the track in the middle of a race. She didn't even realize she'd hit the ground. Her brain didn't have time to process that. She didn't realize she'd fallen that hard. And when she got up, she was shocked to see how much of a gap had formed between her and the rest of the race. So at that point, she had a decision, right? She had a decision. She could give up, or she go, well, I'm going to give it a red hot go. And she knew the scores were close for the team championship. There was a lot riding on this. So she thought all she really needed to do was keep running, because if she finished, she'd at least earn 1 point for a team. And she said, as I started running, I began to gain on one girl, and then the rest of the pack didn't seem that far away. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I caught all of them? So that was all her goal it was initially, right? And then on the final curve, she heard the announcer say, watch out for Heather Donadan. And she thought, yeah, watch out, I'm coming. And from there, it was just this incredible surge of energy and an effortless press for the finish line. Now, people have been compelled to reach out to her from all walks of life, totally inspired by her. I am not a sporty person. That video inspires me every time I watch it. And she says, I always tell people this race isn't just about never giving up. It's about discovering what you're capable of when you're given the opportunity to rise above the adversity. So the reason I wanted to show you this video is it's because our perception in situations is unique. When she fell, some people would have thought, right, that's a good enough reason to give up. But she had immense motivation to get up. She wanted to do it for her team. And she then thought, what if? What if I could win this race? So when stress comes into play in your life, you can have a plan, you can have a strategy, and you communicate to the world around you that you have personal standards that you want to create. And so, yeah, what would you have done in that situation, right? That's quite amazing. So here's where we start to talk about some of this science of hacking your brain. This comes from Professor Ian Robinson, Chair of Psychology, Institute of Neuroscience. This is what I've been saying to you. Channeling stress into a positive energy can radically improve performance and creativity, making you brighter and quicker. That's what stress can do for you if you use it right. And it's possible to hack your brain or hijack the flight or fight hormones, such as cortisol, adrenaline, before they cause problems. That's a quote from that professor. So you can also find things called the amygdala hijack, which I'll explain to you what that's about as well. So I'm going to try and make it really simple, make the science simple, because I found this really difficult to understand when I first started going into this space. So want to give you some simple analogies. As a species, our brain has evolved. We know that there's some animals that haven't evolved much from dinosaurs, right? So lizards and alligators and crocodiles, they are still very primal, and we call that the reptilian part of our brain. That's the part of our brain that's still very similar to that part of those kind of species, right? It's very primal, it's very instinctive, it's the survival part of our brain, a physiological response for survival. Then we have the middle part of the brain, which starts to go into that more emotional state. So that's why we have cats. And you think about dogs and cats and other animals, we start to see them expressing emotion. And that's why we have those relationships and we cuddle with them. You can't really see, what's that song? Never smile at a crocodile or whatever. So we don't see emotion with reptilian animals so much. It's just survival responses. And for other species, primarily humans, we have a rational brain and a thinking part of our brain. Okay, getting really sciencey now. This is from a book. This book really made an impact for me in terms of understanding stress. It's called The Stress Proof Brain. So I love the analogy that Melanie Greenberg uses to explain how our brain works. It just makes sense for me. So the amygdala is the important one I want to talk to you about. The amygdala is, I say it's like the smoke alarm. So, you know, when you burn toast in your apartment or your house and you have to stand under the smoke alarm as it's going off, fanning it with a magazine or a tea towel going, it's not a fire, it's just burnt toast. Right? The smoke alarm does not know the difference between a fire and burnt toast. It just knows there's smoke. The amygdala is like that in our brain. It does not know the difference between real stress or real threat and perceived threat. It just knows that we are feeling threatened. We have the hypothalamus. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but that's the operations manager. So when it gets the signals, it starts to tell the body to release hormones. The hippocampus is a really interesting part of the brain. That's the brain's biographer. Now, this is really interesting for psychologists because this is where experiences that we have will trigger us to have a stress response. Best way I can give you an example of this, I see a cave. I go into that cave to explore it. Little did I know there's a bear in that cave. The bear attacks me and I barely make it out alive. And I had that life-threatening experience. Next time I go walking, I see a cave. Now my hippocampus kicks into gear and goes, remember what happened last time you went into a cave? Don't go in there. It could be dangerous. Then later on, I'm walking past a garden shed. The door is open. It's very dark and deep. I don't think that it's a cave, but there's a part of my brain that says, that's a bit like a cave. Don't go in there. It could be dangerous. So we have, as a species, we have learned responses. So where this kicks into play into work, for example, let's say you had a big brother that used to bully you and tease you, then you go to work and your boss is behaving in a way that triggers to your hippocampus going, this is a bit like when your brother used to tease you. It's same kind of experience. It's why you go, I don't know why this makes me feel like this. I don't know why this stresses me out. There's something probably in your hippocampus that is the little biographer that is going, this is a little bit the same. Now, this is where we are powerful as a species because we can use our prefrontal cortex, the CEO, the thinking part of our brain, to override the amygdala. We can trick it. Simply, this is really freaky, but simply by changing the way we think, we can change the hormonal responses and the physical responses in our body. Now, I'm just going to paraphrase this incredible TED Talk. This TED Talk gets promoted all the time by TED Talks. It is one of their most famous and popular TED Talks. I highly encourage you to watch it. I'm just going to paraphrase some of the key information from this. It's called How to Make Stress Your Friend by Kelly McGonigal. And she actually cites some research. So she used to be a psychologist that was anti-stress until she started looking into the research. And this is mind-blowing, some of this research, right? So I'm just going to summarize it. In 2012, they did a study with 30,000 adults in an 8-year study. And they were asked 2 questions. The first question is, how much stress have you had in the last year? Low, moderate, high. Kelly McGonigal asks that of the audience in her TED Talk. And this is a really important one. Do you believe stress is harmful to your health? Now, when they looked at the results and the numbers, what they found is that those who believed stress was harmful to their health had a 43% increased risk of dying. That's what the data showed them. And those who did not believe this had a lower death rate than the average. So the key here is that in that study is that the way people think actually had a direct correlation to their survival rate. And so then there was another study that was done at Harvard, and this one's the one that really blows my mind. This was basically they had 2 groups, right? And in one of the tests, they put a group, they gave the group the same experience, They gave them both the same experience, and they told them it was going to be stressful and there was going to be intense social pressure. So they did things like they made them do really difficult maths problems, getting them to count backwards and subtract numbers, counting backwards, and then they'd say, hurry up, go faster, and then say, stop, that person's going too slow, everybody has to start again. They just made it really, really stressful for people. Now, in the first group, they said, this is a stress experiment. We're going to put you into stress. You're going to feel stressed out. Your heart's going to be pounding. You're going to be breathing faster. You might even break into a sweat. Okay. And then with the second group of participants, they were told that you're going to have these experiences, but the difference was they told them that the stress was helpful. So they said, when you feel that pounding heart, just know that's your body preparing you for action. If you're experiencing rapid breathing, that's your body getting oxygen to your brain. And what the research showed was that when you change your mind about stress, you change your body's response to stress. So those that view stress as helpful to their performance were actually less stressed out and more confident. And we interpret physical symptoms as signs of anxiety or that we're not coping very well. That's what we start to tell us. So what's really freaky about this science is that the physical response can be changed simply by our thoughts. That's what's really freaky. So this is what Kelly McGonigal explained. So when you go into a stress response, this is what your blood vessels look like, right? But when you go into a stress response, they contract like this. And that is why stress is often associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not healthy in this state. But here's what's mind-blowing. The group that were told that stress is healthy, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like that. So their heart is still pounding, but it's a much healthier cardiovascular profile. And what Kelly McGonigal says, which is also really interesting, is this is what your blood vessels look like in moments of joy and courage. And courage, I think, is an interesting word because courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about acting despite the fear and doing that with confidence. And I wanted to touch on that because that's the essence of what we do at the Hinwood Institute, that we equip busy leaders and busy business owners, really busy people and stressed people sometimes to make decisions in the moment in pressure situations that for the long with courage. So they're able to courageously make decisions in pressure situations for the long-term benefit of their team and their business and their well-being. And that's what we want to get you to. And so the new science is revealing to us that how we think about stress matters. So we need to be able to stop in those moments, think, this is my body helping me to rise to this challenge. And when you view stress in this way, your body believes you and your body responds to stress in a much healthier way. So you've heard me talk a bit about cortisol and adrenaline. And this is, I struggle with this one, norepinephrine, which is another hormone, and glucocorticoids. So this is what's produced in that flight, fight response. And it's there to keep us alive. It's important and to help us function. But what we can do is turn that down. And how we can turn that down is by encourage the production of these ones. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. There are so many tools where you can pump out some of these. A lot of people are talking about a dopamine detox because we actually get too much through social media and other things. We get over-motivated. But again, I'm not going to go there. But there are so many different ways that we can increase these hormones to be able to help counteract this. Oxytocin is one that we produce through connect touch. So having a puppy dog, having cuddle, being intimate, kissing, all of those ones will produce that healthy hormone. Okay, just having a look at my little time. How are we going for time here? So the key to this is that changing the words that you think and say can actually change your environment. And we can see that there is a physiological hormonal shift in our body when we do that. It's massive. And it can be the difference between performance and failure. Big one, Simon Sinek, who is a leadership coach, talks about athletes that are interviewed and the journalists saying, were you nervous? Because they're imagining themselves in that experience and they're going, no, I was excited, because they're shifting the way they think about that situation. They're seeing it as an opportunity rather than a threat, in a nutshell, in a very paraphrased nutshell. So what we know is that as a species, we seek out threat. We look for threat. We look for those negative things and we go, is that a threat? Well, yeah, maybe. And then we seek evidence to back up that conclusion that we have. So we have to really work hard to push the positive thoughts and the gratitude into our brain process. And research shows that it reduces our cortisol, increases our productivity. There's a whole range of things that we can do with a practice of positivity and gratitude. And so they say there should be a ratio of 5-1 of positive to negative. Now, research has also been done with difficult kids in schools, and they actually say for those kids that are living in trauma, they actually have a higher ratio. I think it's like something like 9-1 in order for them to be able to learn and function. So there's actually evidence to support that. So I want to share with you, okay, how do we switch this up even more? What are the traits of people that are resilient? What can we do to actually switch things on and go from being smashed to smashing it, right? To actually be as a winner in situations. So emotional resilience is the ability to be able to adapt to stressful situations or crisis. It's about being able to roll with the punches, being able to bounce back and adapt to adversity without lasting difficulties or long-term impacts. So I'm going to share with you the 7 traits, common traits that are exhibited by emotionally resilient people, and give you some practical examples. I want you to write these down because these are things I want you to focus on into attributes that I want you to bring into your environment and really focus your energy on. I'm going to use the example of Turia Pitt. Turia is an extraordinary woman. Some of you might be familiar with her story. She was a marathon runner who was caught in a bushfire. She had burns to over 90% of her body, so much that they couldn't actually use any skin on her body for skin grafts. There was nothing left. She had to get a skin donor. She should not have survived. The surgeon was surprised that she did. However, she had been trained as a marathon runner to be resilient. She was healthy, her body was healthy, but she also applied the traits of resilience as a marathon runner to her survival. And she now coaches people, not just in sport, but in resilience, in how to be resilient in their life. So some of these key traits, I'm going to give you examples with Turia. And it's so much about her mindset that enabled her to survive. She was told she would not walk again, let alone run, and yet she's run marathons. She's quite an extraordinary person. When you read her book or hear her talk, she was always optimistic. The prognosis was not good for her. She was told a lot of things that she would not be able to do. Her family were even told that she was not going to survive. But she found things to be hopeful about and set small goals of things that she wanted to achieve. So she looked for opportunity to be optimistic. She changed her perspective in terms of her goals, in terms of what she wanted to achieve. And she got focused on where the positives were. Now, I think a big thing around shifting perspective is she used her experiences to create a whole new career and opportunity. She probably would never have had the career she has now if she hadn't experienced this massive trauma in her life. So she transformed her mindset to one of victim to one of victor. She just shifted her perspective on how she was going to use this situation to benefit her and to her advantage. Now, for you and I, when that comes into play, a typical one is criticism. Criticism hurts. It's hard. However, criticism is the gift, because it is feedback that tells us where we can improve or do something differently, as long as we take it that way, right? Okay. The next one is perseverance. So she really stuck it out. She kept going. She knew that she's, again, setting small goals and sticking with it and persevering with it to get through. And it's what we do when we start a new job. It's really scary, but we stick with it even though we don't know what we're doing. Are we doing this right? Are people going to judge me if I made a mistake? We persevere. Emotional awareness is a really interesting one, and more you are seeing in job descriptions that they want a high level of emotional intelligence. It's now one of those soft skills that people actually value within the workplace. For Turia, she had to be really aware of how her family and friends were feeling around her, how little kids might feel when they came into contact with her. She had to be aware not only of her own emotions, but of those around her. That's the fundamental elements of emotional intelligence, right? So being aware and being prepared of your own emotions means that you're not going to get caught out in different situations. going to talk a little bit more about this one later on, but one of the fundamental things that are important for emotional resilient people is seeking support. The mistake that professional people make is that asking for help is a sign of weakness, that I'm a failure. But resilient people, the most effective time managers, know when to ask for help, who to ask for help, and what sort of help to ask for. And that's what you want to master. Taria was incredible at knowing what support mechanisms to pull in around her through every stage of her recovery and into her new career. She was very clever at that. And if you've ever heard her talk, she's funny. She makes light of the situation. If you've ever roller skated or ridden a horse or learned how to ride a bike, you fall on your backside and you laugh at yourself. You get up and you keep going. Taria has a beautiful sense of humor and makes light of some of the difficult challenges that she had to overcome. And choice, having choice, thinking about your choices, thinking about your options and your strategies. Dr. Judy Hinwood says sometimes even choosing not to choose is a choice, right? So not having to be forced to make a decision in the moment. I'm going to share a story with you. This is one of Dr. John's stories that he used to love talking about. And he gives an example of, he was at a dinner party talking to a Supreme Court judge, and the discussion came up about checking in at airports. And the judge shared a story that he had recently flown from Brisbane to London to speak at a conference. The person 3 people ahead of him in the queue in the check-in was raising his voice, making demands, and really becoming abusive. And he was making everyone around him really stressed, right? Because stress can be contagious. We pick up on those hormones. As a species, we pick up on those threats around us. And so he was really making a horrible situation worse. But the check-in agent who was dealing with him was displaying a wonderful, loving and caring manner. And throughout the barrage of abuse, she smiled and she held a calm and relaxed state. And as the abusive passenger walked away from the counter, he turned back to remind the check-in agent that if his bags were not the first ones off in London, that he would personally make sure that she lost her job. Now, the judge who was witnessing all this said that when he stepped up for his turn at the counter, the check-in agent was still calm, relaxed and smiling, and he congratulated her on how well she handled a really difficult situation and how she managed this angry and irate passenger and what he had put her through. And he said to her, "I really admire your skills." And he said to her that he was a Supreme Court judge, and from time to time, he copped similar abuse from people who'd been sentenced or from family or friends in the gallery of the person that had been sentenced. And he asked her, how could you possibly remain so calm and smile and be so pleasant? And this was her answer. Both you and that difficult gentleman are flying to London Heathrow. However, your bags will definitely be arriving in London, whereas that other gentleman, I can assure you his bags will arrive. So she knew in her head she had a choice, and that was the choice she was choosing. They gave her the resilience to get through that situation. I love that story. So resilience is about managing your energy, okay, and changing. So we've got some of the tools already is about changing the way you think about the situation, perception or procedure, filling your brain with positive thoughts, 5 to 1. So there's a few little tools in there. Don't miss them because they are so simple. I'm going to give you some more practical tools now, some real physical tools. Breath is one of the most powerful ones because it releases dopamine into our system. It also slow, low, deep breathing will also stimulate our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve shuts off when we're stressed, but if we stimulate our vagus nerve, it signals the body to get into a positive stress response and to go into positive action rather than shutting down. It gets oxygen to our brain. Because we do it every day, we dismiss it. We go, that's not a tool. But slow and controlled breath is incredibly powerful. Dr. Judy says in those stress responses, just remember low and slow. Deep, low breaths. I like to put my hands on my belly and use the power of my breath to push my hands out, not my muscles, the deep breath. So you can remember low and slow if you want to in those moments, and it will have a powerful effect on your management in the moment. I'm going to give you some practical examples of that in a minute. But by controlling your breath, you can control a critical part of your brain that controls that puts exercises control of the emotional stage you're experiencing. It changes the chemistry in the brain, and it's like taking a natural anti-anxiety drug. This is why women are taught how to control their birth during labor. Controlled breath is what is used by the military. Navy SEALs use it. I'm going to show you a video from an ex-Navy SEAL explaining why Navy SEALs and astronauts are taught this to stay calm.
Most people believe that Navy SEALs are just people that are able to handle stress better than other people, like it's an innate ability. But in reality, it's not. It's something that is trained during SEAL training. And as a candidate, if you aren't able to master stress management, you really can't be a Navy SEAL, and it comes out in training. And so the exercise that we use to prepare ourselves for high stress situations, whether that's a training exercise or combat, is a thing called box breathing. You breathe in for 4 seconds. You use your diaphragm to do it. You hold that breath for 4 seconds. Then you breathe out on a slow 4 count for another 4 seconds. And then you hold with all the air out of your lungs for 4 seconds. And you repeat that loop 5 or 6 times. And what that does is it turns down your sympathetic reaction, which is the fight or flight reaction. And it turns up your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest, relaxation, peace. And it restores harmony to mind and body. Give it a shot.
So in summary, the box breathing is you basically visualizing a box. So the first line is breath in for 4, then the second line down the box is holding for 4, then the next line on the box is breathing out for 4, then the next line of the box is holding it for 4. Box breathing is trained in the military, as this guy said. It was also used in the Australian military. Dr. Dan Pronk, who is a very famous author on resilience, he wrote the book called The Resilience Shield. He worked in the Special Air Service Regiment for the Australian Army. He did 4 intense Afghanistan deployments as a combat doctor with 100+ missions. And they used to use box breathing to control their emotions and their stress response before they would go into an attack. Not saying I want you to join the military, but it's just an example of how it's used. The science of that is used to be able to support people to function in incredibly stressful situations. So you can use it too. Don't underestimate the power of breath. As I mentioned, sleep is incredibly important for resetting the brain. It's when your brain cleans itself out. Your brain will delete the nerve connections that you don't use. And even a nap can improve cognitive function really, really quickly. We produce a hormone called melatonin to help us sleep. Melatonin is triggered by blue light because we are a daytime species. So what I mean by that is when there is no longer blue light active, within 2 hours, your body will start to produce melatonin because the sun has gone down behind the horizon. The blue sky and the blue light is no longer visible. It is the body's way of saying, go to sleep and prepare for tomorrow. Recover, because tomorrow when the sun is up, that is when you need to hunt and gather. But right now you need to recover. So unfortunately, we have blue light in our room, power buttons, mobile telephones, alarm clocks. Get rid of them because it is stopping the production of melatonin. Okay, the cylinder tool. Love this tool. This one is one of the most popular tools from the Stress Management Institute. It is one of the most popular tools for my clients. It is great. It's really popular with first responders. We know that words can have an impact on our mental state and our stress response. We can absorb that energy. So this is where you can trick the amygdala. Really, really powerful. So your amygdala does not know the difference between what's real and what's not. Remember that. Really, really important. If someone is offloading on you, we call it emotional vomit, like they're just pouring it all over you and you feel like you're wearing it. You feel those barbs attacking you. What you can do is visualize a beautiful sphere around you, a shield, and those spears and those barbs are bouncing off the shield. They cannot get you. They cannot attack you. They cannot hurt you. Those words are bouncing off a shield. Now, your cognitive brain is going, that's ridiculous. There's no shield there. But remember, your amygdala does not know the difference. It goes, oh, we're safe here. There is protection. It really helps you in those stressful situations to give you a moment to detach from the situation and observe what's going on rather than letting things get out of control. It just gives you a little bit of breathing space. So I highly encourage you to try it. It's really powerful and it really works. And it's something simple that you can do in that moment. Okay. The next one, as I mentioned, just going to touch on this briefly, the most effective, the people that are most resilient, there is so much research backed around this, is they are comfortable with asking for help. Study was done with kids that were in difficult situations and they looked at those kids that survived those traumatic personal experiences and living conditions and those that didn't. And one of the fundamental elements for those kids that survived that is that they were comfortable with seeking support, knowing who to ask support for and to ask for help. They were also very comfortable at helping others and supporting others and creating a culture of giving and receiving help within their own little community. So please don't hesitate to seek support when you are struggling. Again, Kelly McGonigal's video will talk about this if you watch it. But as a species, we are primed to seek contact with others. We produce oxytocin as a stress response because it's priming our body to seek out connection with other people. That's what we do as a species. We live longer if we connect with others. So it is a fundamental tool to help you manage stressful situations. This is one that Judy really talked a lot about with the Stress Management Institute, but psychologists will talk about this, how important it is to detach from the situation. Now, I found when I was working in a very busy corporate organization dealing with irate customers, if I had a really stressful phone call, even though I'm safe, they're just down the end of the phone, I would get incredibly stressed. So I would take myself outside, breathe in some air, put my toes on the grass, and completely detach. And Judy has a beautiful affirmation that she used, and there's a lot more to this tool, but I'm just going to summarize it, is saying, I release, I let go, I move on, and absolutely letting it go. The practice of slow and deep breathing with this is also really, really beautiful. Now, this is why what's really interesting about this, I want you to think about the smokers that you know. I'm not endorsing smoking, but what smoking does for people who are stressed is this. You think about it, nicotine is a stimulant, it's not a relaxant, but people will say they can think clearer, they feel calmer, they're able to process things better after a stressful situation by going out and having a cigarette. That is because they are doing a few things. They are detaching, they're separating from the situation, and they are doing slow, low controlled breath. That's what cigarette smoking forces them to do, right? You don't have to take up smoking, but you can do that same practice. Have a cup of tea, go outside, and detach for a moment. Okay, this one comes from last tool I'm going to share with you. This is a really interesting one. And again, I'm just scraping the surface. This comes from the Harvard Business Review. And this was actually some research and study done about a practice of empathetic leadership. And I found this absolutely fascinating. And for those business leaders that I work with that are feeling really stressed and out of control at work, this is really, really helpful, is understanding and identifying the different layers of where you're at. So if we have a look at this, this is, do you need less or more in terms of understanding the other person's experience? And this is about your response, your cognitive response, your willingness to act and support. So down here, the pity is, well, I feel sorry for you. Sucks to be you. We don't want to think about it, act on it, deal with it, and we really don't care, right? That's not a very positive situation, and probably narcissistic leaders are like that. We've got sympathy. That's a little bit where we start to feel for you, but we're very detached. So it's almost like we're looking down on you down in the pit and going, oh, it must be terrible being down in there. I'm really sorry for you. I'm sorry you're having that experience. But we're not necessarily willing to do anything to help. We're just sympathizing for you. Oh, I'm sorry that that's happened. No, I kind of understand, but not really. An empathetic response is where I can feel what you're feeling. I'm willing to walk along the path with you. And a lot of people, when we're talking about emotional intelligence, really work on developing their empathetic skills. So understanding the other person's experience and willingness to act and support. What's interesting about the difference between in terms of what the Harvard Business Review is saying, the difference between empathy and compassion is intellect. So it's basically saying some people in some industries get empathetic burnout, where they don't have boundaries or limitations or controls over how much they are investing in people, how much they're feeling for people, and they can get burnt out emotionally. Compassion is what people in aged care, in healthcare, in schools, they are very good at. They are able to turn on and turn off the empathetic response, so they can see and feel what that person is going through. They then employ a very sophisticated cognitive process. Ramya, you have to leave. I understand. No problem. There is a recording after this, and I'll send you an email with some of the resources that are available as well. Thank you for staying this long. I'm almost finished actually as well, but I've just got some time available for people for questions. Thank you, Ramya. Thank you for joining us. The difference here as a leader is being able to know, having a choice, which is what emotionally resilient people have, right? A choice of what things you will do and can commit to providing support. But then you also have your limitations, and you're very clear about those boundaries. So a lot of what I do with people, whether it's in workplace mediation or coaching or training, is about getting clear about what those boundaries are, what's appropriate, how do you protect yourself, what's professional, what's not professional. So quite a lot of tools there. I've gone through them very quickly. I've kind of given you a quick summary of some of those tools. So then the idea, as I said, is to try and put all of this into balance. A lot of what I've talked to you about now, you're starting to pick up is that there's a lot of these elements that we need to put into balance in order to function well in our personal life and our professional life. And I know I'm giving you some tools, some quick fixes that you can apply that can help you, and some strategies and some ways to think about certain things. Like I said, I'm just giving you some quick things and scratching the surface there. So, but if I can encapsulate everything that we do, this is what we've developed and we understand that are principles of success. So if we're looking at this in terms of an overall plan, this is what we would recommend. So, and this is where I want you to take notes as well, right? So number one is around clarity. And what I mean by that is understanding what direction you're going in. What's your true north? What drives you? Where do you go off course? Like, where do you drift off course? And how do you reorientate yourself? Where are your boundaries stretching, right? Sneaking. How do you pull back? And how do you create a bird's eye view to be able to look at what's happening and be more mindful and strategic about your choices? And this is about recalibrating what your priorities are. Sometimes they shift. And I talked a lot in the beginning about being able to identify your stresses, your triggers. What are the signs of when you are stressed? What will trigger your stress? What's symptomatic for you? And sometimes a lot of people aren't aware of it. And we do a lot of work to help people identify that. And this sometimes, typically, when I start working with people, a lot of what we do initially is about putting out fires. There's fires that are raging, that are out of control. I'm talking metaphorically. And it's how we get those under control. And then how do we stop those from occurring in the first place? And that can be dealing with conflicts and tensions at work, time management, stress storms, and just realigning what's important. Then we talk about essence. And what I mean about that is, I love this stuff. This is about identifying your genius zone. What makes you you? What makes you special and different? Your point of difference. And especially for those that are an integral part of their business. What is your unique style of communicating? What's your unique style of working and organizing things? Now, we use a lot of reputable diagnostic tools for this process to get really precise analysis of our clients. And we help people to identify their genius zone. And what the benefit of this is, it helps you also to avoid conflicts and tensions and stresses. For you, it's about understanding and aligning your truth. What it is, getting clear on what it is you place value on. I'm not talking about values you aspire to, like honesty and integrity and those kind of things. It's about in the heart of in your soul. What is it that you place value on, and is it present in your world? What do you place energy into? What saps your energy? And when you get aligned to this, you can, and it helps you to put out those fires to stop them occurring, but then it makes you faster. You get to your goals quicker, you get outcomes quicker, and you become so rock solid in that clarity that you can make decisions quicker, a lot quicker. You don't debate over things, and you have rock solid personal purpose, personal vision, and you're clear about what your mission is in life and how you're going to get there. And this enables people to be able to communicate like a victor rather than a victim, which is what I was talking about with Turia Pitt, right? It's about being able to be assertive without being aggressive, without having to give in, but still being professional and emotionally intelligent, being precise, solution orientated and focused. The other one is the agility. This is very much about the resilience. This is where you're able to check your perspective on things, actually stop and look at the end of the day, what's important, and adapt. Being able to adapt, roll with the punches. Another part that's really important to this is managing what distracts you in life, big or small, what is pulling you away, what is making you procrastinate. And it's being able to influence change around you and influence change in yourself. It also enables you to lead in the moment, making those choices in the moment, being courageous in that moment to make decisions that are going to support you long term. It enables you to communicate with confidence despite the circumstances, manage conflicts, negotiate, and being able to bounce back when things happen. Unwavering is about conviction. This is about your mojo. This is about having an inspired destiny, not just doing the same old, and I'll see what happens. It's about being more strategic about which direction you go and where life can take you. This is about things not just being a dream and a fantasy, but making them a reality, making your dreams become goals. And in order to do that, having a strategic plan to put in place to make those things happen. So it's about working with integrity and being very clear about what's integral to you, having unstoppable conviction because you have a very clear plan that aligns with the core of who you are and where you want to go. Now, in order to do this, you need rock solid tools and systems for that success. And what we like to do is constantly seek out industry best for that. What are the industry best tools? So sometimes they're digital tools and technical tools, or sometimes they are tried and tested things that have been around forever that are going to help you be strategic and moving forward. It's about bringing together motivation, strategic thinking, and strategic planning. And then we've got well-being. And this is why I talk to you about sleep and energy and toxicity. This is about using metrics that actually matter. It's about identifying and addressing any energy leaks and toxicity, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually in the workplace. It's about embedding a practice of well-being culture in your own life, but also that in the place that you work. So this is about you, your team, your stakeholders, your colleagues, and your business. It's all of the well-being of all of those things. So when we talk about well-being, it's not just physical, it's mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, a whole approach. And what we like to say is it's where business is healthy from the head to the heart, as well as the hip pocket. All of those things are nice and healthy and balanced. So these are the key principles that we've found that when all of these things are in play, then people will have success. They will be resilient. They can transform their stress into a source of strength. They go from chaos to calm, from stress to strength. And dare I say it, what I love to say is they go from shit to shine. You're actually able to traverse the challenges and succeed when you've got these things in play. So I want you to get your pen ready because I'm going to leave you as we finish up. I'm here to answer any more questions, but I want to give you some things. These are free. I'm not selling you anything. This is an opportunity for you to extend your learning. It's up to you what you want to take advantage of in terms of the things I'm going to share with you. First one, if you want to do it, write this down, resilientleaderscoreapp.com. This is a free scorecard assessment. You simply have to answer 25 simple questions, and this will rate you against those 5 key principles I just mentioned. It will rate you against those and give you some practical tools, strategies, and solutions to apply if you're falling down in any of those areas or things that you need to focus on and think about. So I'll give you a customized report that you can utilize. So it's free, doesn't cost you anything. You can utilize that as well. And sometimes what I will do with people, which you're also welcome to do, is I will go through that report with you and I can see in the back end how you answered those questions, and it'll tell me a lot about you, and I can give you some strategies around that as well. So that's available if you want to do it. Otherwise, you can just do the scorecard. You don't have to have a call with me. The other thing which I mentioned, I did mention this to Oda as well earlier on, I think, or George. It was George, I was talking to, is a strategy session. So I'm going to put my contact details on the end. You will also get a link in an email in order to be able to book a strategy session. So this is for those of you that just no worries, Craig. It'll be this stuff will be in the email if you have to take off. You've got most of the wisdom here already. Some of this stuff will be in an email. Go and do what you need to do. Don't want to increase your time stress. Thank you for participating. And some others are having to head off as well. Totally understand. So with this strategy session, this is just basically cutting to the chase. You're able to get customized solutions. So yes, you can do the scorecard and it will give you some ideas on what you can do, but the strategy session is really you telling me what those fires are and me giving you some immediate steps and a plan to be able to approach that. Okay, so you're welcome to that. It is not a sales call. Let me be clear on that. The reason it's not a sales call is because my goal is to give value. I want to help people. And when I do that, people inevitably come back to work with me. I can't help everyone, and I only want to work with the people that I can help. So the goal is to give you value first. If you want to work with me, then you can always ask about that afterwards. I will say I only work with about 40% of the people I talk to. I want to make sure I can help people, and I have a limited number of coaching spaces available. So I'm very selective about the people that I work with. Otherwise, there are some other options, but wait, there's more. I'm just going to, this little video, there's no sound, it's just a little video showing you on the website. There's what we call the shop, but there are free things in here as well as paid things. So there are some challenges. This is like a 7-day challenge where you're going to go through things and achieve some results, practical tools, more learning. So if you want more learning, that's there. There's also some intensive technical courses that you can do that you can pay for. There is all John and Judy's books, all their books that they have written over the years that you can go and purchase if you want to as well, that are on the shop there as well. So there's a range of things that are available there within the shop. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. I'm just going to, if I can, I want to show you this one here. This one is a beautiful product. This is John and Judy's. This was really, really popular. I love this. Basically, it's a little lessons every day that you can utilize, and they are simple but very practical. So this comes from all of John and Judy's work, and you basically get a daily lesson, a mindful approach, and a practical application, a stress management tool that you can utilize. Really, really popular when they had the Stress Management Institute. So we've made it available for people to be able to purchase as well. So I encourage you, if you want more, there's a whole range of other stuff there you can do. I will unfortunately do reach a limitation with my one-on-one coaching and then have a waiting list for those that want it. However, we are currently building and getting expression of interest for a group coaching program. A lot of people have asked me to develop a group coaching program. So this is where I will be doing, there will be self-directed learning, so addressing all of those key principles in self-directed online learning, monthly intensive masterclasses like this one. And so normally this is a paid event, by the way. You've got it absolutely free. And then doing weekly coaching either with myself or Michael or Judy or other practitioners. Thank you, Cindy. I'm glad you've got great information and some references there. Lastly, just connect with me on social media. Some of you are already following me on social media, whether it's through LinkedIn or TikTok or Facebook. We've got Facebook groups that you can join as well. I am constantly sharing resources, tools, information, tips, tricks. So you're welcome to connect with me through your platform of choice. If you want to book in a strategy session, you can just reach out on the website. You can email my team here. And one favor I do have to ask of you, I've been really bad at getting Google reviews. I think I've got 3. So if you've enjoyed this webinar, if you've enjoyed the learning, can I ask you to do me a favor and to give me a Google review? I'm trying to build up my Google reviews. So this is the URL here if you want to write that down, or there's a QR code here for a Google review. I would be most appreciative. I wanted to allow a bit of time at the end for people that had any questions. For those that you have stuck out with me on this webinar, thank you so much for hanging out until the end. I'm here to answer any questions. I think there is a way I can open up the mic, but I don't know how to do it with this new tool yet. I have to practice with it. But otherwise, if you want to pop any questions into the chat or into the question feature there, I can answer any for you. And for those of you that have stayed, I'm just going to sip of my water. I was talking to my business partner yesterday, and you know what we've decided to do? For my next webinars, I'm going to be doing more of these webinars. We're going to actually do lucky door prizes, and we've decided we are going to, for those people that stay till the end and actually can answer a question, so they just haven't had their camera on and staying to the end, we're going to give them a prize. Like, it'll probably be a voucher to something, and it will be in the vicinity of around $100 worth. And so we'll do lucky door prizes for probably 1, 2, maybe 3 people that join webinars. So stay tuned. If you've got value from this, highly encourage you to come to the next one, because not only will you get great value, but you will also get a prize potentially. Any questions? No one's got any questions? Thank you for the support that's in the chat for those that are sharing their support. If you don't have any questions, that's okay. For anyone, I know there is a lot of people that are going to be watching the recording and have requested to watch the recording. Thank you, Michelle, for your support. If you do have any questions after, thank you, Sylvia. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You're welcome to ask me questions outside of the webinar. You're welcome to email me, or if you want a strategy session to address some of those things, you can. Please email me, because it's really, really helpful when people ask me questions. No worries, Peter. She had to duck out and deal with a crisis. Hey, the reality. All righty. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, and thank you all. Thank you, George. I look forward to catching up with you. I thank you for hanging out with me for 2 hours. You're amazing. And I look forward to catching up with you all afterwards. Enjoy your day. Be kind to yourselves.